And you're the presenter?
I'm facilitating.
Okay, so that's the clicker. It should be working. As long as nobody touches anything, it should still be working. Sometimes if it clicks off, it doesn't like to go. So it clicks back. And then microphone, you don't make too much your panels. And if you'd rather not have to bring the microphone, you can click.
They're like, we did.
If any of your panels try to be clipped to it, this email sent, and you should already be recording. Let me double check to make sure I didn't forget. And yes, you should.
Yep. Yeah. Looks like we're good. Yeah.
Yes, you are recording. Put you back on here. And you should be all set to go.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, hi. I look forward to this. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure that. Yeah, yes, sure. Yeah, we're gonna work out, right? Yeah. I got it. It's like saying, so. Yeah. No, we have everything from them. Really strong this year, which is great. Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in just another minute. Just as a reminder, the during breakout session is housing vouchers and other sources of rental assistance. Thank you everyone for joining us for our breakout session today. I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. Just for a quick operational heads up, we'll hold off on any questions. If we end with some time, we'll do question and answer at the end. If not, we can hunt down our presenters during one of our breaks. So great, thank you.
I just turned it off.
Welcome, everyone. Well, we still have a little bit of energy left after all that great information. So my name is Ann Watts. I am formerly of the state of Colorado's Department of Local Affairs Division of Housing, where I manage the voucher programs. Courtney, my former colleague, is actually going to get into more detail on those programs, but I thought I would start us off today with some just general information about housing vouchers and how people go about getting them. And it's Housing Vouchers 101. So a housing voucher is basically rental assistance to help low-income people afford their homes. It pays the landlords the difference between a payment standard and what the actual tenant can afford. Which is usually between, well, it is always somewhere between 30 and 40% of their adjusted income. And those vouchers, once you get them, the magic, the beauty is that they are ongoing. So as long as you can stay in compliance keep up with your recertifications, stay in compliance, all of that, you will keep your voucher. There's two overarching kinds of vouchers. One is tenant-based and the other is project-based. So tenant-based meaning the individual gets a voucher and they can take it to any landlord, and hopefully, work out that deal. And then if it's project-based, the voucher is actually attached to a unit. And so like we just heard about the Grove at Cottonwood and the 811 program, and we'll hear more about them in detail. That's an example of a project-based voucher. So vouchers are provided by housing authorities. There are a lot of different housing authorities in the state of Colorado. So I've got a link on the next slide to, that you can look at for the list of all of them. But there, vast majority of the vouchers that we have in the state of Colorado are funded by HUD through what's known as the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You may have known it by Section 8. That is technically an old name. But in addition, the state of Colorado has invested quite a bit of general fund money into some state-funded vouchers that are primarily tenant-based. And they are managed, and DOLA's community access team. And so those are kind of a hybrid, where HIPPUF is involved in making referrals. DOH handles a lot of the application, and then the day-to-day ongoing work of managing those vouchers is delegated to some contract agencies that DOH works with. So how do you get a voucher? First off, you want to go to every single housing authority that you can find that has vouchers in the areas that you are interested in living in. Not halfway across the state maybe, but at least the general area. And you'd be surprised when you start looking at how many different agencies are involved just in Metro Denver. So again, there's a website there that HUD publishes the public housing authorities. And you get to bug Courtney to find out who DOH is currently contracting with. She'll have the latest information about that. But it's important to note that these housing authorities, they don't just have an open application process. They restrict it because they have such overwhelming demand. So you have to find out when they open their waiting list and what their process is. So there's definitely some research to be done for each. And then when you do make that initial application, be aware that it's really like a pre-application. You're giving them some basic information. And it's really important at that stage that if there's any preferences that they cite in their application, that if there's anything there that you can support, you know, being eligible for that preference, that you check that off. Because that will make a huge difference in how soon you get called with an offer of voucher. And so while you're waiting, because unfortunately a lot of these programs have waiting lists that take a couple years to get through. You want to make sure that you keep up to date your contact information, stay in touch with that housing authority. When they reach out to you, respond as quickly as possible, because at that point in time, it's definitely going to be of the essence. And at that point, you'll fill out a more detailed application with up-to-date information about your income, your household composition, and you'll, at that point, have to provide documentation to back up that information. So in particular, if you've obviously checked off a preference for having a disability, you'll need to be prepared with a verification form from your doctor to support that. So once the housing authority actually approves your voucher application, they will invite you to a briefing or an orientation meeting. It'll be very important for you to attend that at that point in time. They're going to explain to you all the detailed rules and regulations that come along with the voucher and their process and how they manage their vouchers. Your voucher will actually specify your payment standard, kind of that rent plus utilities amount that you're shooting for as you go out and look. And at that point, once you've had your briefing, you can start your search. If you have access to a housing navigation program like the one Jordan runs in Denver, or any other type of housing navigator, use them because they can make an enormous difference in how quickly you can find a place that's gonna meet your needs. So, finding a home, you're gonna have a limited amount of time on your voucher to actually find a home that meets your needs. If you need more time, you can ask for more time, especially if that need is based on a disability, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation. And also be aware that Colorado's fair housing laws not only protect you from discrimination based on your disability, they also, a few years ago, added source of income as a category that landlords cannot discriminate. So they cannot refuse to rent to you just because you have a voucher. Some landlords do need kind of a gentle reminding of that. They may not be as aware of that as they ought to be. But just be aware of that for your own self-advocacy. And realize the home you find needs to be within the jurisdiction of the housing authority. So especially if you did successfully manage multiple applications, you're gonna wanna keep track of where that voucher is from. The rent and utilities will have to be within the payment standard. If it can't be, because for some reason it's too hard to find an apartment, say that's accessible for your needs. At that price point, you can ask for reasonable accommodation for a little bit more of a budget. The other thing that your unit will have to do is pass an inspection. So keep that in mind as well while you're looking. So once you've actually found a unit, there's still more paperwork. Your landlord will fill out a form called a RAFTA, request for tenancy approval, that details all the information on the rent that's going to be charged, the utilities that are included or not included. That give the housing authority the chance to just review the calculations and make sure that the unit is going to fit within the payment standard, within your 30 to 40% of your income. Something to keep in mind is if you do end up renting something that's a little bit more than the payment standard, you will end up paying a little bit more as your share of the rent. So, but that's capped out at 40% of your income. So hopefully it's still reasonably affordable. Once that RAFTA is approved, the housing authority will also handle that inspection. So if anything needs to be fixed, it's gonna have to be fixed before you can move in. But they'll let the landlord know, hey, it passed or it didn't pass, and this is what needs to be fixed. So make sure, the landlord's probably gonna be eager to have you sign a lease. Make sure you do not sign a lease until your housing authority is giving you that clear go-ahead that yes, this unit works, you're good to go. You can sign your lease. Once that happens, you get to move in. Yeah. One last step for you to be aware of is that the landlord and the housing authority are going to sign a contract between themselves called a housing assistance payment contract, or HAP. And that needs to be taken care of within 60 days of when your lease was signed in order for all the paperwork to get processed and the housing authority to start making those payments to the landlord. That's the overview on getting a voucher. How do I keep my voucher is really, I think it's simple. I know it's not necessarily simple for everyone, so hopefully you have support to learn what it means to be a good tenant and a good neighbor. But that is really the foundation of it. If you have any change to your income or really your household composition, so you want someone to move in with you, you need to work with your housing authority and reach out to them to review that situation and make sure that meets the requirements. So always make sure that your housing authority knows how to get a hold of you and vice versa. If you have any issues, they can often help you negotiate with your landlord if there's something to be resolved. If they hear issues, they may reach out to you. You need to be responsive. That's gonna be really key for you to ongoing, be able to stay in compliance with your voucher and hang on to that for as long as you need it. The other thing to be aware of is that you will have an annual recertification process. So every year you'll be resubmitting information about your income, your household composition, you know, if anybody else is living with you, et cetera. And the housing authority will take a look at that and reevaluate what your share of the rent will be ongoing. So that is, and I know we've decided we want to hold questions to the end, but that covers it for me. I'll pass it on to Courtney.
And voila, thank you.
Hello, my name is Courtney Thomason. I am the Community Access Team Section 811 and HOPO Administrator for the Colorado Division of Housing. Very long. So this part of the presentation will actually be focused more on the Section 811 program versus the traditional CAT, but they are essentially married, kind of. So they have some of the same information on both sides. So if you do have questions, yeah, but we can answer those. So where did Section 811 and S is just for section. I know we got maybe confused because Section 8, Section 811. Section 811 is a different program than Section 8. So this program was implemented in 2010 by Frank Millville, and it was through Congress. And it actually went into effect for the housing authorities and state agencies in fiscal year 2012. And this program is designed for individuals to be able to access affordable housing while living with disabilities, and so that they can also access necessary support services in their units. The key components of the S811 is that it provides project rental assistance. So as Ann had mentioned previously, there are two types of rental assistance. One is project-based, the other is tenant-based. This S811 program is specifically project-based, which means that the assistance is tied to the unit. So if somebody was in one of these S811 units and they decided to leave, the assistance would not follow them. This is provided to qualifying properties that do apply to Division of Housing for the funding through an RFA, which is request for application. This also ensures that individuals are not paying more than 30, sometimes 40% of their income towards their rent. It encourages partnerships with the on-site service providers as well. So with the Section 811 program, we have on-site service providers. So those are either completely on-site 24/7, or they are kind of, 9 to 5 daily, depending on what their model is. And it encourages the relationships with them and the tenants because it provides job training, case management, life skills coaching, and it can also help with healthcare access that they may not have had access to prior. And then it, of course, supports residents in achieving a greater independence and improving their quality of life. So the funding and community integration limitations. So if you were to apply for this funding, it is funded through annual appropriations, and it is state agencies that can apply for the funding under the RFA, like I mentioned previously. The community integrations limits on the allocations of the unit. So if you were to apply this, they do obviously have stipulations about how many units that this can be applied to. It can be no more than 25% of the total units on site that can be given this preference. It can be used for supportive housing for people with disabilities. That's mainly what it's for. And it can have occupancy preferences for those with specific disabilities. This is just the PRA, which is Project Rental Assistance Program Relationships. This just shows who who does what and who speaks to who. So the state housing agency, which is us, Division of Housing, we partner with the state Medicaid agencies, human service agencies, supportive agencies, etc. The owners and property managers partner with us directly, and then they communicate with the tenants directly. Division of Housing is the oversight for this program. So most individuals are not going to come into contact with us if they are tenants, but the service providers do. The target populations and referral sources for these programs. So the main target population is for individuals exiting institutions or with waivers. So HCBS waivers, developmental disabilities waivers, the SLS or DD waiver. Those are the main referral sources that we get our applicants through. The main referral source is going to be the healthcare policy and finance, and that's going to be able to get you involved with transition case management services through options counseling through Dr. Cog. Need information about that? Let me know. I got you. And then, so that's the first referral source. The coordinated entry system, which is maintained by the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, is the second source. That one is going to be the coordinated entry system, formerly the BI-SPNET. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that acronym, but now it is called the coordinated entry assessment, which is much easier than BI-SPNET. And that is through the HMIS system, the Homeless Management Information System. And individuals that do go through that system will be matched with a housing opportunity and then be sent to us. The eligibility criteria for this type of assistance. So the main is HCBS, SLS, IDD waiver, okay? The SLS population specifically does not go through the transition case management services. It goes through an emergency enrollment at HIPAA. You must have a verified disability to be on this program. And it is also for the extremely low income population. I didn't do Broomfield here, I did Denver. So one person, the household is $24,450. That's the maximum amount that you can make in order to be eligible for the program. If you make over that as a party of one, unfortunately, you make too much money. You must be over 18, but under 62 at least signing. This program is a little bit more stringent than our state housing voucher or my CAP program. We don't require documentation such as a birth certificate in the CAP program because this Section 811 program is federal. They do require much more in-depth information. So they require birth certificate, social security card, your government issued ID that must be valid. You also must pass a background check, debts owed, and any SO checks. Bearing that in mind, once you are past all of our checks, the property that we send you to does have their checks as well that you do need to pass. So just because we say, okay, you're good to go and you're eligible for us, unfortunately does not mean that it's an automatic eligibility for the property. Okay, so you come to us and now you have been sent to one of our 9 properties across the metro area, soon to be 10. And so you've been sent to, let's say, Moline Apartments, for example. What you'll do is you'll meet with the landlord, also with your support team. You will complete the apartment application, submit all of your fees, all your documentation to them as well. So you're essentially doing the whole process twice. If you are approved, when and if you are approved by the apartment, the landlord will complete a move-in inspection. As Anne previously mentioned, that with traditional vouchers and state housing vouchers, you have to complete an HQS inspection, which is Housing Quality and Standards Inspection. And that is to ensure that the unit is decent, safe, and sanitary. With these units, the landlord is going to be the one that conducts that. Division of Housing does not have any involvement in the inspection. We just trust the landlord. you know. But they do have to provide an inspection checklist at the end so that we can see what it looked like at the beginning and what it looked like at the end. Should we come in and monitor them, then we can see that they did all of their due diligence. And then once the inspection is completed, then they can sign the lease and move in. Get the keys. Okay, so what to expect after move-in? What we expect is you to be a good tenant, right? So pay your rental portion on time. That is one of the main reasons that people unfortunately get terminated is they do not pay their rental portion on time. It is an independent living program, so it is the responsibility of the participant to ensure that they know what their portion is and where they need to pay, who they need to pay it to, if there's a portal, etc. Also, you need to ensure that you are addressing any notices that are posted to you. That's an expectation as, traditional tenant. And we know that sometimes notices are very scary. And so you don't want to acknowledge it. Maybe you just want to ignore it, push it under the rug. But many times that if notices are posted, sometimes they are posted in error. And that a landlord just doesn't know that maybe they can't post for, let's say, a half payment being late. You cannot post a tenant for that. And they do that anyways. And if we are notified of that, then we can step in and say, this is not appropriate and you shouldn't have posted this notice. So it's extremely important for a tenant to address any notices and also follow up with their housing coordinator when they have a notice to make sure that, all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and everything is as it should be. Also, report any changes in your income or household composition immediately. That is what we expect as well. That is the secondary reason that people get terminated is they fail to let us know that their household composition has changed. We don't care. It's your, it's your life. Everybody's adults. If you want to have somebody live with you, that's fine. We just need to make sure that they pass the appropriate checks, they don't make too much money, and that you have a unit that is going to be allocated for your size. Okay. And then annual or interim recertifications yearly. As Ann mentioned, every single year, they will complete a new recertification packet, which is essentially just their income, household composition, and their signature on a new set of documents for the year. That is required. That's another reason for people to get terminated is they just don't complete that. Division of Housing sends out most things in the mail. We communicate through the mail. And so we stress how important it is for individuals to check their mail, make sure they have a mail key, and to respond in a timely manner. With regard to the annual re-exams, we do it every single year on the first of the day that the first of the month that you moved in. So for example, if you moved in on November 11th, your annual will be November 1st the next year for as long as you continue to reside in that specific unit. Role of the property manager. So with this program, as I mentioned, Division of Housing is more of an oversight agency in this program. So the role of the property manager is really more of a role of a housing coordinator in this situation. They are going to assist with getting the lease signed, of course. They will complete the move-in inspection. So no Division of Housing, no housing authority contact with the inspection. That's completely between the tenant and the landlord. It's their responsibility to calculate the tenant's portion in accordance with their income. Typically, that is the housing coordinator from the housing authority that does that. But in this case, it is the property manager. They will assist with completing the annual and interim recertifications, along with the support staff. I don't want to feel like this is put solely on the property manager. The support staff on site or not is also responsible for assisting with some of these as well. But it is the role of the property manager to maintain a decent, safe, and sanitary conditions for not only the property, but for the units as well. And to address any HQS, any issues such as broken pipes or anything. Hopefully that's not the case, but something simple like a smoke detector, right? It's their responsibility to address those. Ensure tenant compliance with the lease. Normally, it is the housing coordinator that ensures the compliance, and we have the tenant conferences. We meet with them to say, we received this information. What can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again and you don't put your housing at risk? That in this program falls on the property manager. So they post a notice, they have a conference, a mediation to ensure that whatever happened will not happen again. And then to contact us if there are any vacancies within the buildings. So we refer, but we essentially, that's the last kind of step for us at that point until there's a unit available, in which case then they let us know and we turn around and refer again. Supportive services and community partners. So this is extremely important. Most of our individuals do need services. And so it is their responsibility to assist the tenants with obtaining any Medicare, Medicaid, or any healthcare services that they may not already have. Some of our individuals that are coming through the coordinated entry system, MDHI, HMIS, they may not be connected with services yet. And so that is the part of the support services and on-site team to assist them with gaining those services if they need to. It's also to assist the tenants in completing their annual or interim recertifications. I want to touch base on an interim. An interim is anything that happens outside of your annual. So if your income changes, let's say your annual, let's just use November. If your income changes in July, that is an interim. Okay, so it's just anything that happens outside of your move-in month. And then assist tenants with obtaining any funds should they be unable to pay any portion of their rent. We provide documentation, many ways of letting them know what their portion is in order to help them budget. Sometimes it doesn't work and they need a little assistance. So it is part of the supportive services and community partners role to help them get any funds that they need to supplement their. And then assist tenants with any conflict between them, the landlord, or other tenants. They're kind of a liaison. Sometimes landlords we know are not the greatest, so they need a little bit of a buffer. So the difference between Section 811, Housing Choice and CAT vouchers. So these are three different programs, right? Section 811 is federal, but not Housing Choice voucher. CAT vouchers are state, and so there's many differences. This program specifically is project-based vouchers. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, the assistance is tied to the unit, not the person. This program utilizes FMR, or fair market rent, instead of payment standard. Housing assistance, as I mentioned, is not hollow and it is attached to the units, not the tenant. It does not require an HQS or Inspire inspection. This is landlord's responsibility with the move-in checklist, and then we review at monitoring. Also with this program, you are unable to utilize an in-state transfer. So once you're at the building, you can transfer to another Section 811 building, but you cannot transfer out of that building with assistance. The housing coordinator is their landlord and support team. So like I mentioned, there's no outside housing coordinator for this program. It is the landlord or the owner. And the owners are fully aware of what they're taking on when they sign up for this program. And it's federally funded. So the community access team voucher, or the CAT program, is state funded. So we have a little bit more flexibility, as I mentioned, with the birth certificate and documentation and things like that. And then no direct contact between tenants and division of housing, unless it is extenuating circumstances where the landlord and the tenant just can't figure it out or whatever, then they can escalate it to us and we will take it from there. Thank you. I will now hand it off to Amanda.
Hello, everybody.
My name is Amanda Robeck, and I'm a project manager with the Broomfield Housing Alliance. As you heard earlier, BHA serves as the housing authority for the city and county of Broomfield. And I'm here today to talk to you about how BHA will be utilizing the Section 811 vouchers at the Grove at Cottonwood. Obviously, you heard a lot about our project earlier, so really I'm just going to focus on some of the aspects of our project as they relate specifically to voucher use. So from the beginning, as you heard, the site has always been designed or intended to be a housing solution to serve a neurodiverse population. We designed it with 40 units, 1 and 2 bedrooms, as well as a common house that will support services and events and different types of programming on site. I do want to go a little bit in depth about the site programming right now, because as you just heard from Courtney, that's kind of an essential piece of running or administering this voucher program. So right now, our intended programming is based around a consumer-directed service model, which I think you've probably all heard a few times today. What this is that it allows residents to take their financial resources, their waivers, or other state program dollars out into the community to access a diverse range of services that fit their individual needs. There will, however, be an on-site resident concierge. This person, although not a service provider, it will be a BHA employee. So not a service provider in the like waiver kind of sense. They will be on site there to serve as an essential bridge between housing and services for the future residents. They'll guide residents in accessing activities and supports and promote relationship building between the residents. So organizing events and things like that on site. The hope is that this program will support housing quality and retention by ensuring that residents have access to the supports they need to be able to successfully live independently at the Grove, and will allow people with and without disabilities to share and contribute to this interconnected and intentional community. My colleagues and I have had the absolute privilege of since the very beginning of this project, working with an awesome group of local parents, families, advocates, and amazing service providers. It was only through continued conversations and meetings with these groups that we came to really understand some of the housing barriers that exist for this community. Initially, obviously, affordability, general affordability of housing options is always an issue. But there are some barriers we found that seem to be a little more unique to the IDD population. So primarily, as you've heard today, a lot of our neighbors live with aging caregivers. They live in host homes, group homes, or in institutional settings. These settings often have some benefits to them, but may not always be ideal, and there really aren't a lot of other options out there. That's why we're all here, right? But beyond this unideal living arrangements, we've been learning a lot about the financial resources, or oftentimes lack thereof, that are available. So we have been diving headfirst into the world of learning about DD waivers and SLS waivers and this whole world of financing mechanisms that allow residents to access supports. Unfortunately, that doesn't, as you probably all know, cover housing very well. And then we've also learned that through a lot of these programs, the services have to have some form of separation from housing. Desiree talked about that very specifically this morning. In addition to, so through these conversations we've been having, we knew we had to put together a team that knew what they were doing, because this world is very complicated. And we've already talked a bit about the benefit of having that first bullet point, all those people included on your team. But what we really learned a lot from this group was that there was just a lack of knowledge out there about how to access housing specific programs, about how to access waivers. about how the ability even maybe to use your SLS waiver to access a housing voucher. So we did take these conversations we were having into our conversations as we began to build our development team. You saw a lot of these names earlier, so I'm just going to touch on a few of them. But just want to say that as we looked for a development partner, and we looked very, very hard, we understood that we really did need someone that would have the capacity and the empathy and the willingness to look at housing in a new way with us. Because this, what we want to build at the Grove is vastly different from our existing experience with typical affordable housing. And also they had to know a lot about vouchers. So this is why we ended up selecting Blue Line Development. They checked all the boxes we had, and they also have a robust property management program. As a new housing authority, we don't have the capacity to take on the property management for the site. We have 3 whole employees. So we really didn't want to try to take on the property management piece. And as you've heard earlier, it's just insanely complicated, all the paperwork, all the certifications, inspections, all that. And then you get audited every year. So it's a lot of work. So we knew we needed to have somebody on board that could help us carry that. We also did, as Kristen touched on earlier, looked for an architect that was experienced in building intentional communities. We found, and we're also finding that as you select an architect for any of these groups, they have to be really familiar with accessibility requirements and also with requirements that come with having vouchers and units. What does a voucher need to pass an inspection? And also what are some of the requirements that come down with different types of state and federal funding? Early on, we also brought on a financial consultant that had a lot of experience working in low-income housing tax credit projects, and probably almost all of them had vouchers. I can't imagine they didn't. But if you're going to go into this world of affordable housing, you need to have somebody that understands the financing of it, because it is not easy. It's oftentimes very complicated. You've seen the capital stacks that they put up on the board about the main session after lunch today, and bringing together all those funding mechanisms and making sure they tie together and you have all the rules you're supposed to follow and all the regulations that come with each different funding mechanism, because they're all different, is really complicated. So there are a lot of regulations, but one reason to have someone who understands this financial consultant is there are a lot of different rules that impact the underwriting of your project and how you can get from just an idea to closing on a project. So for example, with these Section 811 vouchers, one of the rules is that if you have too many of them on your property, you can trigger Davis-Bacon wages. What that is just higher wages or different method of paying out wages that can add a significant amount of cost to your development budget. And so these are the kinds of things you definitely want to know upfront and not find out later down the road in your project. And then finally, on this last bullet point, we hired a consultant. You've all heard from her several times today, Desiree. And we brought her on in addition to all the amazing people on this list, and especially the first bullet point, because she has experience across the country working on many projects, working with tons of different people. She's seen different housing models, how this works, how it can play out. And that's just invaluable experience. So why Section 811 vouchers? Several reasons. One of the things we really like about Section 811 vouchers is they're designed to work for people with disabilities, right? One of the things we really like about them is that little caveat that Courtney shared with you, that you can access 811 vouchers if you have the SLF waiver, the DD waiver, right? So through all of our conversations in the community, we learned that a lot of our hopeful future residents are already accessing these waivers. So ideally, this is going to give them an easier path to access one of these vouchers. The next reason is that these vouchers just provide a great amount of subsidy. Both Ann and Courtney went into that kind of in depth, but allowing residents to go out into the community, access a unit that they wouldn't otherwise be able to afford while only paying 30 to 40% of their income towards rent. The Broomfield number, 30% AMI for a one-person household is actually just over $27,000 a year. In Boulder, it is just over 30. So a little bit different than the Denver numbers, a little bit higher. So as long as you make those amounts or below, you would qualify in Broomfield. And then these vouchers, because they are project-based, aid in our underwriting process. So instead of being able to count on a 30% AMI rent, which might be only like what, $700, we're able to count on much more than that while not impacting the resident who will live in that unit at all. What this does is really supports the overall financial operations of the property, allows us to take out more debt. So it gives us more money that we have to build the property. And then the last thing is that these vouchers are available to BHA. We are a small housing authority, and currently we are a grantee to the state for our voucher program. So we don't readily have regular housing choice vouchers to project-based. Other housing authorities, larger ones out there, they have been able to do that with their vouchers. At the moment, we are not able to do that. So the 811 program allowed us to bring project-based vouchers to the site. So you guys have already heard a lot about this slide, so I'm not gonna go back down through this list. But this just goes to show you how much regulation there is, how much paperwork, how much work it takes to run and operate a voucher program. Again, this is why we selected Blue Line, because they have a robust property management department that is well versed in this area. Okay. And so our next steps at the Grove, as it relates to vouchers. So we have not yet broken ground on the project, but as we move forward, one of the things we'll be doing is formalizing our existing tenant selection plan, making sure that any new rules or regulations that come into effect between now and then are incorporated. One of the things I'd like to bring up specifically about our tenant selection plan is you heard a lot about referral sources and how the referral process through the state works. One of the things we're aiming to do is incorporate some of our local service providers, very specifically Friends of Broomfield and Imagine, on that list of referral agencies along with the state sources. One thing we are going to aim to do as we get closer to leasing up the Grove is hold some informational sessions. We've heard loud and clear that there is this barrier of knowledge between the waiver side of things and the voucher side of things. And we really feel like we owe it to our community to make sure that everyone's aware of how you can access these vouchers. Especially if you're already in the world of waivers and you have an SLS waiver, you have a DD waiver, how you can use that to access housing subsidy. Next one, continue advocacy. So it is our goal to continue at every chance we can to advocate for this community. Tim says this is the inaugural summit, so we hope to be back here every year, learning from all of you, but also sharing all the lessons learned as we develop, we build the Grove, we open it, we lease it up, we live in it, really. So we hope to be back here telling stories and helping to make the next one even better, which is how we will spread the model. Our goal is to make this a model that can be duplicated over and over again so that we can house as many people as possible. And with that, I think maybe do we have time for questions?
Well, thank you to our presenters very much. We have time for just probably one question. If someone has a burning question for our panel, can I raise your hand? Oh, it's a quick question. Hold on, let me pass the mic just so folks at the back.
Does the tenant have the ability to see that contract to make sure it's signed?
So with the section 811, there is no, sorry. I can speak for it.
Just with Jen and Jen.
Yeah, in general, I mean, the client can't see it, that's no problem, but it is not their responsibility to get it signed. Yeah, it should be the landlord and the support staff.
I realize that. I'm just wondering. You've run into some people who are like, why do you want to see that? I want to make sure it happened.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, absolutely. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Well, again, thanks everyone for coming and attending this section. You've got about 10 minutes. So grab another glass of water, cup of coffee, go to the restroom, and then we'll be heading into our next round of breakout sessions. Breakout room 3 is recent case management redesign explained. Breakout room 1 is community partnerships, current and future opportunities. And then if you're looking for housing navigation services for the IDG population, you'll stay in here with me. So awesome. If you have any questions, come by and ask, catch up with our presenters. Otherwise, hope you'll have a great next breakout.
Need-based housing services. Oh, yeah, okay.
And apologies, one of the schedules, it called it needed county services and that way.
Oh, I did. Yes. I gave that, I gave it to Tim and he said, it's still. He said that's what he's gonna do. You've seen it.
Number 3. Yes, thank y'all.
How did it go? Perfect. Perfect.